Welcome to Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. Our podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? What can we learn from them? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Welcome to another informative and engaging episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose. We so encouraged to hear about the experiences and stories from so many from all across this large geography. But most of all, we just appreciate the opportunity to continue to hear the experiences and, professional journeys of peers. And today is no different. Brad, we appreciate having you.
Michael, thanks very much for the invite. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome. Absolutely welcome. And friends, as you know, the power of good things is in the sharing. So be generous and, click that subscribe button and definitely you're going to like this episode. I can tell you now, you just go ahead and click that button. And then when you're done, make sure to be posting some of the comments. Always great is, you'll get an earful from Brad. So you can count on good news here so far. However you want to take it.
Well,
my goodness. Well, Brad, people go ahead.
Well, I like to tell everybody I'm from Kansas. It takes me 30 minutes to say hello, so this could go on forever.
Well, I hope they're having a long trip when they get a chance to take this one in. Oh, my goodness. Well, if that's where you're from, so how did that being where you're from to where you're at now, how'd you get into the appraisal and valuation profession?
Oh, Lord. Well, born in the small town of Missouri. And by the way, for those people that aren't aware, Missouri actually has an I on the end of it. But for those of us that were born there, we actually call it Missouri. There's an A. I'm not sure how that got screwed up. Then got thrown out of that state, moved to Kansas. And then from Kansas, went through the trials and tribulations of college, more tribulations and trials on some case. I jokingly like to tell people that when I was at my first college, notice the air quotes around first, I had a 0.4 my first semester and a 0.6 my second semester. But the university told me it was a cumulative grade point average.
Oh,
so I took a 0.4, added it to 0.6, had a 1.0 times 4 was 4.0. And I thought I was in good shape. Well, they had a difference of opinion. Apparently, when I left, the Dark Horse Tavern went out of business. So I ended up out in Arizona.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, I ended up out in Arizona after Kansas and went to school out there for a while, left, came back, and did some stuff, a little bit of offshore oil construction work, got out of that, went back to school, finally finished, got my graduate degree out of Northern Arizona, have an MBA, and got hired by a defense contracting company out of San Diego. And from there, did that for 13 years. Chairman of the board and I had a disagreement multiple times. He finally asked me not to come back. And in 1992, I was hanging out and I had some time off. So I flew out to Texas to go see the best man at my wedding. And he and I were playing golf with his younger brother. And his younger brother goes, well, what are you going to do? And I told him, I said, I know what I'm not going to do. I am not going back into corporate life. And he goes, well, why don't you be an appraiser? And I said, what the hell is that? And he goes, well, I'm an appraiser. He said, I do residential work. And he goes, at the time, I didn't know what it was. He goes, I'm an SRA. And I went, oh, okay. And so he said, how long are you out here for? And I told him.
So what?
Yeah, so what? And so we went out and he told me, so why don't you come out tomorrow? I got 2 site visits. And I said, okay. So I followed him around and he asked me to hold on to the smart end of the tape. And I didn't screw that up too badly. And I saw what he was doing and I thought, well, this is kind of cool. Maybe I can do that for a couple of years until I figure out what I want to be when I grow up. Well, 32 years later, apparently I have not figured out what I want to be when I grow up because I'm still an appraiser. And that's how I got into this thing. I actually spent an extra week out there and hung out with him, and his business partner and he were both gracious enough to open up their books and let me kind of take a look at it and see what their cash flow and what their income streams were and that kind of stuff. And I thought, let's give this a try and see what happens. And that was right about the time of licensing was getting started. So I got the classes going and then the licensing was coming into effect. It hadn't gotten mandatory yet, I don't think, at that point. think it was close by. And so I got real lucky. I was at a class, met a lady whose husband owned an appraisal shop, got in there with them for a little bit, only a couple of months, 3 or 4 months, because the market in 92 was starting to roll over. And then got really lucky and got introduced to a gentleman who had an exclusive agreement up in Brentwood, California, up in West LA, with a large small bank. And he had an exclusive agreement to handle both the wholesale and the retail appraisal work. So I was commuting up there and hanging out 4 days a week and then coming back home. And that's really how I got my teeth cut, because first house he took me out on was a 20,000 square foot mansion in Beverly Hills. And I climbed out of his car and looked at him.
Was that the one that you live in now?
Yeah. That's the one I live in. Yeah, I paid.
Love about you, Brad. Love that.
Oh, it was nuts. I climbed out of the car and I looked at him and I said, "You want me to measure this thing?" He goes, "Yeah." He said, "That's not going to be the problem." He said, "It'll only take you about a half an hour to measure the thing. It's a damn box." He said, "The problem's going to be is inside the house."
Oh.
And I go, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Well, you're going to find out." He said, "Plan on being here for probably 2.5 days." And I was 2 days with the interior design. Because we annotate.
My gosh.
I annotated everything that was in that house because it was somebody famous and they had done loads of everything. And so everything had to be annotated in the report. So that was my real introduction to custom homes and large high-end properties, which, our high-end properties where I'm at down in Riverside County is not anything. I mean, you can't even buy a 200 square foot cottage up in Beverly Hills for what goes on down here. But so that's how I got kicking into this thing. And yeah, it was a great lesson. I spent 2.5 years with him and I learned land appraisals. I learned high-end custom home stuff. I learned custom home, new construction. I did work in Malibu, Brentwood, Palisades, Beverly Hills, south of Encino, for anybody that's familiar with the area. South of Encino Boulevard means it's all the music people and all the other stuff. And I did some work out in Thousand Oaks and Westlake Village. And so it was an amazing opportunity and an amazing way to get started in the business because I had a really, really good mentor. And from there, then I guess in towards the end of middle of 95 into 95, I broke off and started doing my own work down here in Temecula, and I've been independent on my own ever since.
Wow, that's amazing, Brad. I mean, not everybody starts out in Hollywood.
Well, yeah, I got used to people looking at me kind of funny because when I show up at their house in Beverly Hills and I got a Stetson and a pair of boots and a Western, a rodeo belt buckle, it's kind of like, are you part of the Village People group or are you the appraiser? So.
Oh, wow.
Out where I'm at, it's not such a big deal. I'm down in Temecula, California, and out where I'm at wasn't such a big deal because there was a lot of horse properties and some cattle ranches, small ranches and stuff. So people were used to seeing it. But Beverly Hills and Brentwood, no se habla. Who is this guy?
No se habla. That's even better. So how, for people that would like to have lightning strike twice, how do they go about finding such a great start in terms of a market area and a mentor?
Well, I think now with everything that's been going on the last couple of years, it's really hard. And I feel bad for the people that are trying to come in. And I'm not going to get into the one side or the other, the PREA program or not. But for those people trying to break into this industry right now, I guess the biggest thing I would say is you have to understand what you can bring to the office and the appraiser, to the appraisal firm. It's not just that you want them to train you. you have to be prepared, I think, to bring value to them. What's your background? What things do you enjoy? What things have you done in your previous lifetime? And I don't care if it's slinging pizzas. If you were slinging pizzas and you increased your capacity of slinging pizzas from, doing 1 an hour to 10 an hour, then let them know. I mean, I know that sounds like a weird comparison, but it means that you're willing to learn. It means you're willing to bring something to the table to help increase the proceeds and the profit of that particular business. And everybody's got their own little things that they enjoy doing, or they have their own little backgrounds, or maybe they're young and they're really talented with Excel, or they're really talented with apps and tablets and phones. And they have this capability that they can bring an expertise to somebody that is like me, will be turning 71 in 10 days or 11 days. And
so young for this industry, man. You're almost a pup.
Yeah, let me tell you, no, that's not true, because according to the average age, I'm screwing that up because over that. I think it's the average age was 58 or something. So, but I think if you can bring that kind of expertise, or maybe you've done some things with Word, or you're familiar with how to set up tables and put together some things in a Word doc form. I mean, any of that kind of stuff where you can help that firm out with those type of technologies, I think that's also part of the puzzle. Because a lot of the appraisers that are, in their 60s or 70s, they're struggling with this. I know some of them are getting it, but, it was a struggle. I was probably 62 or 3 before I finally actually started to figure out how I could push the button on Excel. And it took me a couple, 2-3 years. And if you can bring something to the party on that end, that may be a foot in the door. And so I think that's kind of how some of the newer appraisers need, people trying to get into the industry need to start up. And also research the appraisal firm that you're trying to get to. Don't just do dialing for dollars. Find out who the appraiser is. What do they specialize in? What type of work do they do? Look at their website. Understand where they're from. How long have they been in business? What type of product do they do? And if you're interested in commercial, then find out what type of commercial work is it. If you're residential, because is it medical? Is it hotels? Is it golf courses? What is it? And if it's a golf course, maybe you played golf in high school and college, or you played golf on the high school team. Whatever it is, then that's one more thing to bring to the party. And so I think that's where the newbie appraisers need to kind of take a look at it and see how they can bring value to the organization by understanding the organization, and not, just going to the Bureau of Real Estate Appraisers in your particular state and dialing up a number and saying, oh, well, hey, you need anybody to help? And I get calls like that quite frequently. And I have to explain to them, number one, I'm a single shop. Number two, I can help you if you get into certain situations. If you want to give me a call, I'll be more than happy to give you the time. But coming from a corporate background, I had numerous responsibilities and people that were reporting into me. And I decided that having other people working with me or for me was not exactly what I wanted. I don't get Christmas cards from any of those people that used to report to me. So I'm not sure my management skills were all that good. And, I'm always willing to try and help people if they're newer into the appraisal business and they want to call and ask a question about something that they've stepped into. I'm always willing to do that. I've got some people that I bounce things off of, and I'm always open to have other people bounce questions off of me. And I do the same thing with the real estate agents and brokers, same thing with the attorneys, paralegals. And, I always tell everybody, hey, pick up the phone and call. If you got a question about something, call me and let's talk about it. And I've had conversations with new people that have called that are trying to get in the industry that don't know anything about PAREA. And I've given them direction on that. I've told them to reach out to the Appraisal Institute, do some, spell out the words for them, tell them to research that. Because there's some benefits to it. At least you can get some experience and some of the education and stuff. And I point them to different programs where you can go and get your education. So I try to give them some help and guidance because a lot of them don't even have that piece of information yet.
Yeah, that's definitely a challenging one there.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Brad, given your experience and stuff, when you go back and you look at, I mean, you were in corporate America, you were in San Diego. There are worse places to work in the United States.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that. The weather was a little different than Kansas, I'll tell you that. But I came from a small town. I came from a small town in Kansas, and there for a while, I think there was more people living in the apartment complex when I first moved out here than there was in my whole town. So it was a little bit of a readjustment. So, but I
that's quite an experience. With that,
I can't complain about the beaches and stuff. That was kind of a unique experience. We didn't have a lot of beaches in Kansas.
Oh, goodness. So you spent 2 years. Why did you not stay?
When you're saying that, you're talking about the gentleman up in LA?
Yep.
Yeah.
Up in West LA, yeah.
Well, he was in 95. The things were really, we were kind of in the midst of a mini 08, 09. And things were changing, and there was some change.
Yep.
There was going to be some change in ownership at the bank. And then a couple of things happened, and things were starting to dissolve. And so my mentor and I were talking about it, and I said, look, I really kind of want to get out on my own anyway. And he had a couple of other appraisers there that were going to be able to help with the work. He had 2 other appraisers. He had a total of, let's see, at one time we had 1, 2, 3. We had 4 appraisers, and then when I left, he was down to 2, and that was plenty to do what he needed to do. So I stepped out, and I really did want to start my own business because the driving back and forth to LA was a pain in the neck. Because from where I'm at up there, without traffic was about an hour and 50 to 2 hours, and with traffic, it could be a day and a half or 2 days.
Oh, that's funny. True, very true, but funny.
Yeah.
So when you decided to go out on your own because of your market area, how did you go about, establishing a foothold? Because that's a challenge. Here you are, you've got great experience in one of the most diverse markets in the country, and eclectic as well. And yet, you go to a little, not so, high-end market and you're starting over.
Yeah, the good news was for me is that my last endeavor in my corporate world was I was senior VP of marketing and sales. So it didn't come, I wasn't shy about it, let's put it this way. But I reached out, I found out, I went around to a couple of the builders, and they had their own mortgage companies, and I found out who those contacts were. So then I drove to those places and introduced myself and met a couple of the local builders' mortgage companies. And then from there, I reached out to a couple of, more than a couple. Oh, gosh, I must have reached out to 6 or 7 regional banks, a couple of credit unions, and then trying to think. Trying to remember if it was Washington. I think it was Washington Mutual was one of the first big banks that I got involved with. And then I got involved with Downey Savings and some other regional banks that all eventually went under and down in 08 and 09. And just for clarification, not due to my appraisals, but because of the other things that they were doing and tying their mortgages together and having them hand stamped with, these are AAA rated bonds that they were putting together, which turned out not to be. And so but that's kind of how I got started. Was I just kept knocking on doors and providing good quality customer service, which I know is difficult now for the residential world because you're really not talking to the client anymore other than the AMC. And most of the people at the AMC really don't know what's going on because they're mostly typically you're not talking to appraisers at that point unless there's something wrong or some sort of an issue. So it's a little more complicated now on the residential side. But that's kind of how I got started. It was just knocking on doors and remembering that. I don't remember what the old story was. I think it was, there was a guy that went out, he had a recipe, and he had 1,118 no's before he finally got a yes. And it turned out to be the guy, Colonel Sanders, with Kentucky Fried Chicken. And so whether or not I have the numbers correct or not, I just understood you were going to get a lot of no's, and you just had to keep knocking on doors. And once I got to the point of where I was able to, to let these people know what was going on and how to do some things, then, it was really worked out well for me. And I helped create even though I wasn't an Excel person, I helped create a template for a couple of the builders' offices to develop an appraisal package, because a couple of the site agents were always bitching and complaining about appraisers coming in and wasting their time. And I said, well, why don't you guys just create a spreadsheet with all the information and just fill it in after every closed sale, or fill it in with all of your properties, and then just hand that to the appraiser, print it off, and hand it to them when they come in. And they were like, oh my God. And I'm like, yeah, some idiot with a cowboy hat was able to figure that one out. And that's how I endeared myself to the agents there locally, and got in with some of their mortgage companies. And then from there, those agents were actually referring me out. So, it's a referral business, and you've got to present yourself appropriately. And even though there's a lot of lone wolves on the residential appraisal side, a lot of people hanging out in their cave like I am right now, a lot of people sometimes forget that this is a people business. We meet people. And a lot of times, a lot of appraisers, I shouldn't say
what?
Yeah.
No, come on. Are you kidding me?
I know.
Come on.
I know.
Please.
It's hard to believe. We always want a vacant house, so nobody's tailgating us. I got it. But it's people business. And, you've got to be able to open up, and you got to be able to, to be comfortable and talk with people and make them feel comfortable about what you're doing and why you're there and all that. And if you do that kind of thing, it helps grow the business, and it helps keep you going in the right direction. So that's my long-winded answer to a very short question.
No, I think that's absolutely fantastic. And, when you go back, like you said, back in the 90s, and a golf game turned into appraisal, that turned into, spending time in Beverly Hills and living the lifestyle of the rich and famous. You're one of the few Hollywood appraisers that I knew of.
Yeah. I'm not exactly sure that I was the second person in the lead on Pretty Lady in Hollywood, city of dreams. God, Lord help me.
Oh,
yeah, that was
funny. That is funny.
Yeah,
so funny.
It's morphed, and it's continued to morph. And I think, I guess, the other thing is that I've always been comfortable with change. And I think that's the other thing that's really helped me in this business, in my life. I'm 70, I'll be 71 here shortly. And I think being able to handle change and, readjusting to whatever I need to readjust to, I think that's helped me in my business quite a bit, because I don't really deal in the world of AMCs anymore. So.
Wow. Well, that's kind of where I was leading to, is as you started out in the lending space, and how did you stay around that? And then how did that transform over time? Because you're in a very different place now than where you were when you started.
Oh boy, 180 degrees different, different between being on the moon or being on Pluto, comparison to where I was. A lot of it was personal interaction with the lenders, the direct lenders. And there's still direct lenders out there on the residential side. There are still direct lenders out there that you can have interaction with and still develop a relationship with. And you can develop relationships with senior appraisers at lending institutions that are doing review work. And I have one regional bank that I still do business with from time to time on their residential land. And I've got one senior appraiser there that I still communicate with periodically. And I just reach out sometimes just for no other reason but just say hello and check and see what's going on with that individual and the family and all that kind of stuff. And it's about building relationships. And I've continued to do that all along. And things started to morph into the estate business because and I know this is going to be a novel idea. Some of my peers on the residential side have a tendency to believe that the real estate agents and brokers are the enemy. And I'd kind of like to have a conversation with those people just to say that they're not your enemy. Sometimes they're a pain in the backside. I got it. But boy, have they been a source of business for me over the last 20 years. And that's how my business morphed from lending to more private party work and eventually into litigation work. And that was probably the single biggest thing, because I would call and have confirmed sales, especially on properties that I'm looking at that I want to use in my report. And one of them is either really high or the other one's really low or something. It just doesn't make sense. And I'll have a conversation with the agents. And once I get stuff confirmed with them, then I'll say, hey, how are you seeing the market right now? What kind of foot traffic are you seeing on your listings? How many buyers are you working with right now? I mean, those kind of things, just to get an update as to what's going on and let the agent talk to me and tell me how they're seeing things. And then typically a lot of times they'll ask me, well, what's going on with this? Or, hey, I heard about, something changing in the appraisal world. Have you got any knowledge on that? And I'll share information with them. And then at the very end, I'll ask their permission. Can I text you or email you my contact information? And if you ever have a question about appraising on, VA or FHA or Fannie Mae or whatever, Freddie Mac's, USDA stuff, pick up the phone and call. And let's talk about it. And if you've got a property that you're not sure an appraiser might look at, pick up the phone and call. And now, over all these years, I have people call me on the phone and will tell me that so-and-so gave me your name and phone number, and I have absolutely no idea who so-and-so is. And then I'll go look them up to see if I can find their name in the real estate directory, through NAR or CAR or whatever out here in California, and find out where they're at. And then I'll send them a text or an email and say, hey, I just got a referral from you. I really thank you for that referral. And, I don't say there, by the way, I don't remember who you are, but that's really helped, that's really helped build a business. I sometimes have people say, oh, well, Janet gave me your name and phone number. And I go, well, do you know Janet's last name? Well, no, because I got it from so-and-so. I got it from so-and-so. But it's that referral business that has really made my business grow. And to the point of where, as I mentioned, I just, whatever AMC work I do, it's very, very minimal. And most of the AMCs don't want to do business with it because they don't like my fee structure. And I got it. I understand. But most of my 98% private party or litigation support or litigation work or whatever. So, and, a big chunk of that is estates and family law stuff. Also, there's probably going to be, depending upon how things unravel here over the next year and a half, there might start being some more SBA bankruptcies going on, because a lot of people had their businesses tied through private residential property securitization. And so there may be some more SBA filings coming up if things don't somehow or another easy land, soft land, or bad landing. So we'll see where that goes. But, and the other way my business has grown is that I do a fair amount of networking. I participate in the local board, MLS board. I teach to real estate offices about appraisal 101 kind of stuff. I try to keep the agents that I do know updated on the changes that are going on, like the reconsideration of value that the GSEs are going to be implementing on October 31st. Changes to Fannie Mae's requirements on condos, which a lot of appraisers either don't know about or aren't paying attention to, because there's some requirements that are going to come back to bite some appraisers that are doing condos. So I try to keep the agents up to speed on that, and that just periodically keeps my name in front of them. And I get a lot of referrals for my business from that. So it's networking. It's a lot of that type situation, but it's worked out well, and it's gotten me out of the rat race of people sending me broadcast bids. And They want me to bid on a job that's 3 hours away from me in Blythe. And they've sent it out to, I saw one AMC, they didn't hide it appropriately in the blast. And there was like 35 or 40 appraisers on this blast list. And I just looked at
that's just insulting.
It is. It's nuts. And I know why they did it, because nobody's going to Blythe, because it's, the people they're sending it to are probably 2-3 hours away. And, I sent a little note to them and said, hey, can you please take me off your blast list, because I'm not really going to be able to help you on any of your work. And that's finally slowed down where I don't get that in too much of it anymore. But it's just part of the nature of the beast. And
it's really good.
Yeah. And it's, and I'm in a different category of the types of things I need to do as well, work-wise. I know there's, I don't have the same cash flow needs that a lot of people do. But again, a lot of the private party stuff, I always ask appraisers, do you know what your average hourly rate is? Do you know what your average cost per appraisal is? And it's important, because I've heard some comments from some of my peers over the last couple of years with the downturn. Some of them were doing some things in order to try and generate cash. It's just like, oh my gosh, it was horrific, some of the numbers that I was hearing that these people were taking it at, because I know I couldn't do that work for that number that they were taking the job for, because it's below my average cost. And I don't know how to break this to people, but you can't make that up in volume. And, it's just, it's a tough situation. And I'm really fortunate that I branched off and started getting away from the lending work back in 05, 06, just by happenstance. Well, actually not by happenstance. It was actually thanks to Countrywide. I actually hold a great kindness for Countrywide, because they opened me up to what was actually going. I mean, I saw it when I was first starting, and I was working with that small regional bank with my mentor, because I got to see what went behind the curtain, as Wizard of Oz will say. And boy, let me tell you, it was terrifying to see what went on behind the curtain. It was terrifying. So that was my first introduction. And then by accident, I got a fax from Countrywide, who was my second largest client down here in the area where I'm at. And then by accident, I got a fax that showed part of the loan. And this loan that they wanted me to do an appraisal on was 125% financing. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, am I reading this wrong? I'm like, wait a minute, what? And so I called the branch manager and asked the question, go, oh yeah, my God, this 125%, this is the greatest thing going since sliced bread. And oh my God, this is unbelievable. And I said, can you do me a favor? Can you take me off your list, please? And there was silence on the other end of the phone. What? And I said, yeah, I'm not going to be able to do business with Countrywide anymore. And I remember telling my dad, I guess that was in middle to the end of 04, I guess. And I remember talking to my dad and told him, I said, Countrywide could very easily be the demise of this country, the way this is going. And my dad asked me why. And I said, they're doing 125% financing.
Ooh. Wow.
And my dad was an income tax accountant. My dad goes, how the hell does that work? I said, I don't know, but it doesn't sound good. And they continue to do it. And then eventually, Countrywide was one of the ones that took down the toilet in 08 and 09. And they had some other friends that were trying to join the party with them, because everybody saw their success rate on their bookings. So it was a scary situation. And that was one of the things that opened my eyes. And I said, man, I do not want my fingerprints on the barrel of the murder weapon. I got to get out of this. I want to keep appraising, but I got to do something different. So that's Countrywide helped open my eyes, and I'm glad they did, because that got me into a world that I really needed to get out of. So that got me heading in the right direction.
The market right now is tough for appraisal companies. Many companies are having a hard time getting enough work with the same marketing they used to. Is your company struggling, having a hard time getting new customers, or getting additional work from existing customers? The answer to this problem is easier than you think. Do more business with the people you already know. Over 10 years, the average U.S. appraisal firm meets over 17,000 potential customers. That's a lot of people you could be doing business with right now. But it's a big problem if you don't have a proven process to communicate with them. StoryLex turns this problem into an opportunity to grow. Our advanced AI marketing tool can rebuild your contact lists and harvest long-forgotten communications. Imagine reaching out to everyone you've ever met with just one click. For the cost of 1 or 2 appraisals a month, StoryLex helps you reconnect and market to people who already know you, like you, trust you, and want to do business with you. Act now by contacting StoryLex today to turn your business growth dreams into reality. Email appraisal@storylux.com. That is appraisal@storylux.com. And now back to part 2 of the episode.
Yeah, Brad, I appreciate you touching on that. And you mentioned that, because you had a corporate background and you actually had training in business development and sales, one of the things you're not afraid to do is to go out and actually talk to people and connect with them. And you actually make an effort to do some appraisal 101. What does that mean to you in terms of supporting other people? Like, what actually is it? And how do you go about making that happen?
I call the 101 class. And I know some of my peers are doing the same thing. I know a couple of people that do it locally as well. It's more just trying to get the real estate agents and the brokerage offices up to speed on what the appraisers do, because there's a lot of myths running around out there. Agents all the time tell me, well, I didn't go back and look in time because I can't go any further back than 90 days to get sales. And I'm like, well, who told you that? And it came from their great uncle's aunt, sister's mother's brother that told them that somebody told them that you can't go back further than 90 days on an appraisal for a sale. I'm like, well, you can. And appraisers can. They're not restricted to it. And, they go, well, I've talked to an appraiser that said that Fannie Mae won't tell. I said, that's not true. I said, I'll be more than happy to get you a clip of the Fannie Mae selling guide, and you can look at that little paragraph and you can educate yourself on it. And if you ever run into a problem with an appraiser that's giving you difficulties, then send them this little piece of information, because it's just bad data running around out there. And so that's a lot of what I do with them. And I kind of walk them through what an appraisal report looks at. What are they looking at with the appraisal report? And I tell them, go a lot of times, go look for narrative addendums, because there may be information in there that you're not seeing anywhere else. And I know that's going to change with the new UAD that's coming out, reporting mechanism that's coming out. That's going to change, which I think is going to be a benefit. I know it's going to be terrorizing for a lot of people, but I think it's going to be a benefit. Everybody will be able to find just exactly what the issue is, where it's at. But and then also, I talk to them about how to put together a little package for an appraiser. Good pieces of information that the appraiser can actually use, even if they don't want to talk to you, because they're fearful that if you talk to them, they're violated appraisal independence. And I'm not sure how that came about, because I think some people are still living in the world of that 8-month period where we had the HVCC, which, by the way, sunsetted about 14 years ago. And so, I try to give them information, hey, put together, have the seller get involved, put together a 1-page data sheet that talks about the upgrades, the rough amount of money that they spent and what year approximately was it done. And then I explain to them why that year timeline is important for a residential appraiser, because, that helps them fill out their paperwork on their report. And I walk through that for them and give them some ideas. And then I talk to them on rural properties, because there's still agents running around that think you can't go any further than a half mile for rural properties. And I'm like, I know some rural properties that are 3 miles paved road, for God's sakes. What do you mean you're all going a half acre away? So a half mile away, not half acre, half mile away. So, I try to help the agents understand that some of the myths that they have heard are just that, they are myths, and please get away from them. And please do your job. And, in order to do it correctly, here are the things you need to do. Now don't tell me that you have a property in Compton and you want me to get sales out of Beverly Hills, because I'm not sure that's going to work. And, and don't tell me that you're gated. I've had situations where a real estate agent provided me with data, which was fine. And she was in a housing tract that was across the street from a gated community. Well, the gated community is was put together and named after Jack Nicklaus. He's the guy that kind of put everything together, and he had his golf course in there and that kind of stuff.
Ooh.
And the area's called Bear Creek. Yeah, the area's called Bear Creek. So they're doing their thing, but it's a gated community. It's high-end stuff, upper-end stuff. And so all the data that the agent provided me for her track house across the road was all out of Bear Creek. And I'm like, that's not really going to work. So, that's part of what goes on and part of the scenario. And also, folks, if you're hearing dogs bark in the background, I got 2 dogs that are either trying to chase a red-tailed hawk or there's a coyote running around next to the property or something. So apologize for the noise in the background. Because I do live out in acreage.
It makes it real.
Yeah, I do live out in acreage. But anyway, so I try to help the agents understand what they need to do in order to do their job right. And then also to help them support the appraiser with getting them data on what's going on. And I'm talking about making stuff up in order to hit a price. But I'm trying to, give them some ideas as to, hey, here's some things you guys need to look at. So things to consider. And usually it can be anywhere from a 15 or 20 minute spiel to, I've had some brokers tell me, hey, take an hour and a half, teach us how to do paired sales, teach us how you guys make pool adjustments and how you look at views. So I walk them through those kind of scenarios that, that they can do. They've got stats tabs in their MLS sheets and they can take a look at things and figure out what's going on. And, so that's a lot of what goes on. And that's part of how I've built my business up. And I've been fortunate. I've also been able to teach at the board as well. The board has a couple of programs where I've done some educational stuff on appraising. And that's also helped get my face and my name out there. But you have to be believable and you've got to be personable. I mean, you can't come with a chip on your shoulder because some real estate agent drove you nuts or called you on the phone for reconsideration of value when they weren't supposed to. You just have to understand a lot of people they're not completely informed on everything that's going on. So that's how my business has grown and has continued to stay steady and through, these last couple of years where things have been a little on the crazy side. On the lending world side, my family law business, unfortunately, has been really good, which means a lot of families went through COVID and realized that they really didn't like each other that well anymore, I guess. And the family law thing has just really been big. And I feel badly, but it's been a good source of business. So
Wow. I mean, yes. Well, the stats are the stats. Approximately 1/2 of all marriages end in divorce, and 70-ish% of second marriages end divorce, and closer to 80 third marriages end in divorce. So I guess you're in a growth industry. I don't know, from a stat standpoint, but more importantly, Brad, what was your start into that non-lending space called family law and divorce?
My start was I had gone to a local bar association meeting, and it was for family law, and they had their own little association. And I went in and sat down in the back of the room, and they went around the room, and the president of that little association came over and introduced himself and said, "Are you an attorney?" And I said, "No, sir." I said, "I'm not tall enough, smart enough, or good looking enough to be an attorney." And he started laughing and he said, "Well, what are you doing?" I told him I'm an appraiser. And he said, "Oh, great." So we sat down and within they went through and did all their stuff. And then they opened it up for a little question and answer. And they were bouncing some stuff off each other on some legal matters. And apparently there had been a recent case that had been published in the California State Bar Association. And they were discussing that because it was impacting some of the way their settlements and the way they were going to be working through some of their settlements. They were talking about that. And at the very end, somebody was talking about, I'm having a problem finding appraisers that can handle this horse ranch I've got. And so the president tells the guy, he said, "Turn around and look at the guy in the back of the room." And the guy looks and he said, "You see the guy wearing the Stetson? He's an appraiser." And that's literally how I got into it. And so,
oh my gosh, I love that story.
Yeah. So that's how I got my start with my first family law appraisal. It was on a horse ranch locally. And the attorney liked the work that was done and the way that I handled his client, who was in his words, high maintenance. And his words were very accurate. And so he got good feedback. I kind of had a heads up of what was going on, so I dealt with it as best I could. And he got good feedback on it. And I got a couple more referrals from them. And then they had a case where another attorney, they were trying to figure out how they could get from having dual appraisals. And because they just didn't want it, they were going to be a boatload of money, and they didn't want to get in dueling appraisals. It's going to take more time. They're going to show up in court, and it's going to be more money. And the one attorney that I had been doing business with on a couple of his jobs said, well, why don't we try this guy, Bassi, give him a whirl, because I like his work. He seems to have been really fair, and he didn't take anybody's side. He just was reporting what was going on. And so then that attorney called up and agreed, and I did a client where they were both the plaintiff and the respondent were the client. And that worked out. And then from there, it started to kind of open up. And then attorneys started talking when they were sitting down in their mediation sessions, trying to figure out what to do about an appraiser. And my name came around, and that's how it's kind of grown. But, a lot of times the appraisers have to be careful because they can't get swept up into the bitch session, for a lack of a better word, that goes on between the plaintiff or the respondent, because, they're in the midst of a heated battle in most cases, and their emotions and energy level is extremely high. And you, as the appraiser, can't get sucked into that. And you have to do your due diligence, and you have to do the reporting of the market and not trying to make the market. And if you do that, you'll have some success on the family law stuff. And I know a lot of people are concerned, well, I don't want to go to court. I don't want to testify. And I'm like, guys, gals, folks, let's back up here for a minute. If a fellow wearing a Stetson and a rodeo belt buckle and a pair of cowboy boots can go in, y'all can do it. You just have to get educated on it and understand, what your role is and how you conduct yourself in court. And you can take classes on it. And some of the classes I've taken are not cheap, but I've learned a lot from them, and it's helped me become a, better in court. Am I a perfect expert witness? Absolutely not. But you have to remind yourself that a lot of people in that courtroom don't have a real estate background like you do. And, as long as you've done your work and you've been truthful and you've supported your adjustments, if you've made any, or you've done it in a Word doc, and, you've done it on a qualitative basis, not a quantitative basis, and you're believable, then that's what the courts are looking for. The judge in a family law deal, they've seen a lot of appraisal reports. And they may not have a real estate background, but they know when somebody's blowing smoke at them. And a judge doesn't like that. And a judge very quickly, if they sense that appraiser has gotten swayed by one side or the other, they can throw it out and make them all go back and start over again. And that's frustrating for the attorneys. And when that happens, I can pretty much guarantee you that you're not going to get a phone call back from those two law offices. So it's a matter of, doing your job correctly and supportable, and as USPAP says, there is no perfect appraisal, but you just need to be supported and you need to be believable. And the report needs to be based on facts. And if you do that, then you get up and just, be yourself and don't talk over anybody, and especially the judge, because that's the trier of fact. And it's scary. Yeah. The first couple times you do it, but, get outside your box, be a Michael Hobbs, break out of that box, go do the different things that are out there that are challenges and things that, make you think, can I really do that? And there's good courses out there that you can take. And I always tell everybody that wants to get into litigation work as an expert, go to attorneys and find out if there's an attorneys or attorney groups are teaching how to be an expert witness, or go to an American Bar Association program where they talk about how the attorneys are going to depose an expert witness. Man, you want to get your eyes open? That's a good class. Not cheap, but that's a good class to take. Find out all their tricks. So, that's kind of how I got going with it. And then the estate thing was kind of a natural deal for me because my dad was an income tax accountant, and he ended up being, towards the end of his career, he ended up being trustee on about I don't know, 50 to 60 trusts, I guess. He was based out of Sun City, Arizona. He was trustee on a lot of estates. And so I got to hear a lot of stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly with that. And so I branched off into that area as well. And then I took a couple of classes. I traveled, which I'm going to be traveling here in a week. I'll be up in San Francisco. The Northern California chapter's got a conference going on up there on the 18th, I believe. Yeah, 18th. And there's going to be a session, and it's going to be on the IRS talking about doing appraisal work. And it's probably, I'm going to guess, going to be the person doing the speaking is going to be the Western Regional Manager for the IRS that handles all the appraisal reviews. So kind of like getting it from the horse's mouth kind of thing. So again, it's making associations and getting to meet people. And I had a real good relationship with a gentleman up there, and I believe he has retired now. And there's probably a new person, I believe. I could be wrong. I'm hoping not, because he's a really good guy, and I haven't called him in a couple of years because I haven't had to talk to him. But that's a good way to get educated and see what's going on and understand that there are different definitions of market value and different things that we, the appraiser, need to be up to speed on. And please, please, please don't do a family law job or a estate job on a 1004 form. Please don't do that.
Oh, goodness. Oh, goodness,
And,
Brad. Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Wow, man. It's just it's something else.
Yeah. So that's,
man. So, I mean, Brad, given everything that you've seen and you've heard and you've experienced, I mean, you've been around so much, and, you retired from Hollywood. I mean, what are you looking forward to over the next 3 to 5 years around, the industry or the work you're doing or changes that are coming?
Wow. Boy. I think the really big pressure point is, well, there's a couple of pressure points. And what I'm hoping for, and I know a lot of appraisers are going to probably pull out their double-barreled shotgun and load it with 8-shot gauge to try and hit me. I really hope that the interest rates don't go too low too quickly, because if they do, around the time that Fannie Mae starts releasing this new UAD, this could be a complete, I'll keep it clean, this could be a complete discombobulation. Or for any of you that were in the military, you can put the word cluster in front of it and add whatever words you want after it. But I am concerned about the UAD because I've had some conversations, not in a bad way, but I've had conversations with some really good appraisers that I know that are older, nearing retirement or at retirement, and have said, I'm not going through any more changes. And I'm a little nervous that we're going to lose some of our senior members that have been around the horn. And I'm a little nervous that it might impact the volume of appraisers, which some people would say, oh, that'll be great because my fees will go up. And yeah, that may very well be the case. But if this UAD thing hits at the same time, man, I see this as being a major cluster, a big, big issue. And I'm a little concerned about that. I guess that's the first issue. The second issue that gives me pause, and that is artificial intelligence. I'm learning AI. I'm learning how to use AI with my appraisal reporting to kind of help proof some of my stuff and do some of the things that are going on. And I've been kind of testing it to see what will it do with the raw data and how does it create templates that I can utilize and how accurate is that. So I'm having to kind of test it and then put it into Excel and see if the doggone charts look the same. And a couple of them, they weren't even in the same hemisphere. So I'm like, oh boy. So I'm a little nervous about AI, but I think AI is going to do some things that will be good, but I also don't know what AI will do in the future, and will that create an impact on the appraisal business, especially on the residential side where it's a little bit more uniform. So I have some concerns about that. And I guess those are the two things. I know with my type of business that I'm involved with now, I'm not as concerned about those types of changes because a lot of those clients are one-off individuals, or they're an attorney, or they're a law firm, or they're a bankruptcy attorney, or what have you. So I'm not as concerned about that portion of the business, but I just don't know where the residential lending business is going to go. So I do have some concerns. And it's not that the UAD is going to get rid of appraisers, because, I have to be somewhat tongue-in-cheek when I say this, because everybody tells me, well, the GSEs are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to get this new UAD up and running. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's true, but we've also known the government to spend money on a lot of things that didn't make sense and that they've ended up junking. So, I'm not sure that that's a real remedy. And although I do like Scott Reuter a lot, I know him better than I know Lyle Radke. And I hear the stories of what's being told. And I also really like Gunny Hazlitt from the VA. I haven't had any interactions with, I guess, the people from HUD, mainly because I don't do any HUD work. I haven't done HUD work since 2015, when I stopped doing any HUD work at all, when they changed the way they did their 4001 manual and the emphasis they made on that. I just stopped doing all FHA. Plus, I can see the handwriting on the wall that the next downturn, the appraisers that have been doing FHA work are going to get their heads handed, because they're going to be seen as an inspectors, even though they say they're not a home inspector. So, and that's just my take. But I just don't know where the lending world is going to be in a couple of 3 or 4 years. And I don't know how that's going to work. Now, some of the newer appraisers that are younger, that are willing to, take a look at hybrids and don't have the same prejudices, that biases, and I don't mean that in a racial bias way, I'm talking about hybrids and property data collectors and all those kind of things. I don't know where that's going to end up at and how that's going to turn. So I think those appraisers that are running around out here doing this, the 45 or 50,000 appraisers, however many there are out here now, I think the word change is going to be really appropriate. And I don't know how many of them are really going to be willing to make change. And I think that's going to be the stumbling block that the industry is going to see for a while. And I'm not sure that they're going to be able to bring enough appraisers on board quickly enough and get them up to speed before anything silly starts happening. I hope I'm wrong. I hope nothing crazy happens in the industry. I hope those that have been chiming that they're going to leave the industry as soon as these UAD formatting comes in, I hope that isn't the case. But if it does, I think we're going to have some issues in the industry. And that gives me pause, because in spite of everything that's been written, and in spite of HUD and Ms. Marcia Fudge and a lot of the other people running around out there, are friends at the National Fair Housing Agency. And I don't believe that I'm that doggone naive, and to believe that there isn't racial bias running around somewhere in somebody's heart. But I still have a hard time picturing why somebody wants to kill a deal and go through 9 yards of insanity on the backside of that deal just because of the person's skin color. And I'm sure maybe somebody's done it, but they've painted the picture that we're all racially biased. And they painted the picture that we're all biased. And yes, I know everybody has bias. I got it. But we're talking about the valuation of an appraisal report. And I'm having a struggle with that portion of the puzzle. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that are taller, smarter than I am. Psychologists and psychiatrists are going to come on and tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about. And I'll probably agree with them. Yeah, you're right. I probably don't know what I'm talking about. But all the people that I know, that I've run into, that I've seen, based on what happens on the backside of this, why would you want to kill a deal on a purchase? And oh, by the way, we really don't know what your magical number is on a refi. So, where are we at on that front? And I'll be interested to see and I'll tell you the other thing too.
Totally agree.
That case in Maryland that's outstanding right now, on the bias case that's in Maryland, the one in Baltimore, if that ends up not going the way of the plaintiff, the defendant has a interesting countersuit. And it will be real interesting to see what happens if that doesn't go the way of the plaintiff, what the defendant ends up doing, and what little shake, rattle, and roll that does to the appraisal bias situation in National Fair Housing Agency, and the fact that they continue to get grant money from HUD so that they can go out and continue to collect data and try and sue appraisers. Yeah, that's the one thing that does give me pause. When I start seeing billboards in different cities where they've got billboards posted, and I'm not in those cities, so I don't know if they're accurate or not. But if those actually really are billboards that are posted about, call us if you think you've got racial bias. And the ROV process, the new ROV process, they stipulate racial bias right in there. So they're trying to hammer more and more on that. And, if there is somebody that's doing it, yeah, I agree. Let's go get them. I've got a pickup truck with a trailer hitch, and I got 4 ropes in the back of my truck. Still, I still do roping, roping cows and stuff. So, let me know. I'll be more than happy to drag them down 12 miles of bad asphalt road. But we really haven't found anybody that's been convicted of that yet. And I'm not sure, where all that's going to end up at. So I got some other takes, but I'm not going to voice them. But that's kind of where I'm at as far as the next couple of years. And I think the roller coaster is going to be a roller coaster through probably 2027. And I think it'll take us a couple of years for the dust to settle. And then we'll see where we're at.
That's a lot of dust to settle there, Brad, but I appreciate you sharing that outlook over the next 3 to 5 years. I mean, you have filled the cup of curiosity on that one. I totally appreciate it.
Well, I don't know how accurate any of it is, but that's just my thoughts and take on it.
Oh, my goodness. Well, man, as it always is, what a fascinating hour of perspective and professional path here as a long-standing and, as we can say, credible peer, given all the court work and stuff that you do and expert witness work that you've come across. So we appreciate you sharing a little bit of that with us today, Brad.
Michael, thank you so much for having me. It's truly an honor, and I'm so blessed that I was able to meet you 12, 13 years ago. It's great, and it's kind of fun to see how this whole circle has gone out and come back around again, and here I am hanging out in your podcast, and I truly appreciate it.
We're grateful. The Perusings podcast isn't what it is without the thoughtfulness, the generosity, and the openness of peers like you to share perspective, share some laughs, and also share some insight and foresight. So Brad, we appreciate it and can't wait to see them light up the chat with their feedback as well.
All righty. Take good care of yourself, Michael. Thanks again.
All right. Until next time, friends. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Perusings, Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing professional paths and achievements of our beloved guests. Before we go, please subscribe on your listening channel, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. After you drop a comment below, who is one friend and peer you can generously share this episode with? If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Perusings, Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.